Skilled warriors battling to the death in grandiose arenas have captivated audiences, offering a glimpse into the brutal spectacle that once entertained Roman citizens and served as a livelihood for the gladiators themselves. Amplified by cinematic special effects and dramatic soundtracks, the clash of strength and skill in the arena, juxtaposed with moments of raw human struggle, the will to survive, and desperate acts of defiance, sends adrenaline coursing through viewers. The Academy Award-nominated Gladiator portrays the story of Maximus, a Roman general betrayed by Emperor Commodus and forced into the life of a gladiator. Through his exceptional combat skills, Maximus regains honor, fame, and status, ultimately achieving revenge. This narrative immerses audiences in a visceral tale of vengeance and triumph. But in ancient Rome, could a gladiator truly achieve wealth, social standing, and a reversal of fortune through the bloody contests of the arena? In the early Roman Republic, aristocrats organized combat performances featuring household slaves during funerals. These exhibitions commemorated the deceased by showcasing virtues such as bravery, resilience, and strength. Though not intended to be fatal, these displays recreated the deceased's wartime heroics and inspired spectators to follow in their ancestors' footsteps, dedicating their lives to expanding Rome's frontiers. As Rome expanded its territories, prisoners of war from various nations were brought to the capital and forced to participate in death games. These brutal spectacles satisfied the Roman citizens' desires for vengeance, conquest, and a sense of cultural superiority. In 216 BC, after a humiliating defeat at the hands of the Carthaginians, Rome sought to vent its anger and rally morale by staging gladiatorial combat involving 44 Carthaginian captives during a funeral. The scale and brutality of gladiatorial games grew alongside Rome's territorial conquests. When Octavian, later known as Augustus, consolidated power and Rome became the dominant force in the Mediterranean, he organized 3 gladiatorial games in his own name and 5 more in the names of his children and grandchildren. During these events, approximately 10,000 gladiators fought to the death. Additionally, in venues such as the Circus Maximus, the Roman Forum, and amphitheaters, Augustus staged 26 hunting spectacles featuring wild animals imported from Africa. These events saw the slaughter of around 3,500 animals. By the late Republic, gladiatorial combat had evolved into a grand state ritual. It was a means for Rome to showcase its might, intimidate conquered peoples, and assert the authority of its rulers. As the empire entered a period of slower territorial expansion, the supply of prisoners of war could no longer meet the demands of these spectacles. How could this gap be filled? The emergence of professional gladiators provided the solution to this pressing need. Starting in the 1st century AD, gladiators were no longer limited to prisoners of war. Increasingly, slaves were also conscripted into the profession. During the Roman Empire, slaves convicted of blasphemy, murder, or poisoning were sentenced by courts to gladiator schools. Remarkably, some Roman citizens were drawn to the profession by the promise of lucrative rewards and the thrill of the arena, voluntarily signing contracts with gladiator schools to become professional gladiators. Even Roman emperors could not resist the allure of gladiatorial games, occasionally stepping into the arena themselves. Emperors such as Caligula, Titus, Hadrian, and Commodus all had records of participating in gladiatorial combat. Among them, Commodus stands out for his flamboyant performances. He often portrayed the Roman mythological hero Hercules, wearing a lion's head as a helmet, draped in a lion's skin, and wielding a club. When the emperor entered the arena, extensive safety measures were taken to minimize any risk of injury. His opponents were usually inexperienced novices, and even renowned gladiators were armed only with wooden swords to defend against the emperor's attacks. The outcomes of these staged combats were predictable. Commodus basked in the adulation of the crowd, reveling in the cheers and the thrill of victory. The gladiator school was the first step in a gladiator's professional career. Before entering formal competitions, trainees underwent rigorous, systematic training here. Much like modern professional sports organizations, Roman gladiator schools developed highly efficient, specialized operational systems. First, the school owners signed contracts with voluntary gladiators, specifying the number of matches to be fought within a set period, along with their pay, appearance frequency, and weapons used. During their contract term, gladiators forfeited all personal freedom and became the private property of the school. In return, the school provided food, lodging, medical care, and professional training. The school's agents were responsible for arranging matches with event organizers, promoting fights, and buying, selling, or leasing gladiators. Trainers provided systematic, expert combat instruction. After mastering the basics, trainees were categorized based on their attributes and trained in specific gladiatorial styles. Historical records suggest that there were over 100 such schools across the Roman Empire, with the Ludus Magnus in Rome standing out as the largest and most well-equipped institution. The Ludus Magnus Gladiator School was located adjacent to the Roman Colosseum. Based on a fragment of a marble map from the Severan period, archaeologists have successfully reconstructed the layout of the school. Enclosed by high walls, the school featured a rectangular courtyard with an oval-shaped training arena at its center, measuring 62 meters in length and 45 meters in width. This arena was modeled after the Colosseum, allowing gladiators to simulate real combat and host small-scale matches. On the northern side of the training arena were barracks where gladiators lived. Each room, approximately 20 square meters, housed 2 occupants. The facilities were extremely basic. Rooms had no windows or beds to prevent gladiators from using any tools to aid in escape. On the southern side were the bathhouse, weapons storage rooms, and medical facilities. Gladiators adhered to a strict daily schedule. At dawn, they rose from their barracks and ate breakfast, with barley being a staple of their diet. This grain provided high caloric energy while also increasing body fat. Contrary to the muscular, lean figures often portrayed in films, most gladiators were powerfully built and carried a layer of fat around their muscles. This fat served as a natural barrier, offering some protection against cuts and wounds in combat. After breakfast, the gladiators moved to the training arena. New recruits, fully equipped, practiced thrusting at wooden stakes using wooden swords. These training weapons, along with shields and helmets, were twice as heavy as those used in actual combat, designed to build strength and endurance. Trainers instructed the gladiators to imagine the wooden stakes as their enemies, focusing on the fundamental techniques of attacking and defending vital areas of the human body. Experienced gladiators were as familiar with human anatomy as a surgeon, knowing exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Their primary targets were the heart and areas where veins and arteries were concentrated, such as the throat, the area below the junction of the chest cavity, the armpit, and the femoral artery. By piercing these vital areas with the sword, they could quickly take down their opponent. However, there were limited techniques for attacking these critical points, and every offensive move had a corresponding defensive counter. The key to success was turning these techniques into muscle memory. During training, instructors focused on practicing precise, targeted kills rather than relying on wild slashing. A slash would not penetrate armor, and the bones would provide protection. If a skilled gladiator intended to strike the opponent's heart, they would not thrust the sword directly at the heart. Such a direct thrust would only push the tip of the sword through the ribs, with the blade becoming stuck in the bones. Instead, the gladiator would keep the sword horizontal, waiting for the right moment to strike the opponent's side. The blade would then slip between the ribs, entering the chest cavity and targeting the heart with a single lethal blow. After reaching the basic training standards, the agents further classified the gladiators based on their training performance, physical attributes, and combat preferences, training them into specialized types of gladiators. Over the long history of Rome, more than 30 types of gladiators emerged. Based on weapons and combat techniques, they can be broadly divided into 3 categories: heavy gladiators, light gladiators, and special type gladiators. The formal name for heavy gladiators is scutarii, shield-bearing gladiators. To become a heavy gladiator, one needed to possess a strong and powerful physique, as these gladiators fought with short swords and large shields, wearing heavy armor and helmets. The confrontations were intense. Heavy gladiators were further subdivided into different types, such as the challenger gladiator, who equipped with a short sword and Roman legion shield, and wore a helmet with a mesh eye hole for better protection. Their weapons replicated standard Roman military equipment. The murmillo gladiator, originally derived from the Gaulish gladiators, wore a helmet that covered the entire face with a crest that curved upwards, resembling a fish fin when viewed from the side, hence the name. Their armor consisted of layered iron plates. The secutor gladiator, armed with a short sword and large shield, wore a rounded helmet with only eye holes, which created an intimidating appearance. Light gladiators, known as parmulari, were known for their agility. They used flexible, mobile footwork to outmaneuver clumsy opponents and look for openings. Compared to heavy gladiators, their weapons were more diverse. For example, the hoplomachus, a Greek-style gladiator, used a spear suitable for thrusting, along with a short sword and dagger. They held a small, round, curved metal shield which allowed for both defense and counterattacks. The Thracian gladiator carried a curved Thracian sword which could strike over the shield to kill the opponent. In addition to a small square shield, they wore only leather shin guards. As they lacked full protection, Thracian gladiators had to rely on superior combat techniques to defeat heavily armored gladiators. Their battles were highly favored by Roman audiences. Lastly, the retiarius, a net fighter gladiator, was equipped with a trident, a throwing net, and a backup dagger. This equipment was inspired by fishermen. They had a unique shield, a shoulder guard, gladiator, worn on the arm that didn't hold the trident. This shield protected the arm and extended upward to protect one side of the neck. Apart from that, they had no other form of protection. Special types of gladiators were rare. For example, the andabata, blindfolded gladiator, were criminals who had not trained in a gladiator school. Their battles were more of a comedic spectacle. The 2 blindfolded gladiators fought with swords, wearing helmets that covered their eyes, forcing them to fight blindly until one of them, luckily, received a fatal blow, signaling the end of the match. The audience would shout directions or other helpful hints to guide the blindfolded gladiators to find each other. Another rare type was the democarus, who wielded a sword in each hand without a shield, embodying the philosophy that offense is the best defense. Life in the gladiator schools, where intense training was a daily routine, was dull and monotonous. However, this repetitive and mechanical lifestyle did not last long, because for a gladiator, the worst news they could hear was that a gladiatorial match was about to take place. They would march toward their inevitable end with anxiety, fear, and pain as their companions. Once a gladiatorial event was confirmed, the organizers would first negotiate the appearance fee with the gladiator school's agents. High-level gladiators, skilled in combat and widely known, could attract large audiences to buy tickets, making their fees extraordinarily high. A top gladiator could earn up to 15,000 sesterces, which was equivalent to the lifetime earnings of a Roman semi-skilled worker at the time. This return on investment was comparable to the salaries of modern sports stars for a single game. If a famous gladiator could successfully retire with the prize money accumulated over his career, the amount would be quite substantial. Furthermore, to make a profit, the organizers would rent out advertising space or have gladiators endorse products. In the ruins of Pompeii, ceramic plates bearing images of gladiators and their signatures have been found, clearly indicating limited edition merchandise from ancient Roman games. Lastly, the event schedule would be posted on the walls of taverns and marketplaces, with the most important being the matchups. The extensive promotional activities stirred the enthusiasm of the citizens, and with great anticipation, the day of the match finally arrived. The gladiatorial performances were scheduled for the afternoon of the event day. In the morning, there would be a procession, beast fights, and a break for lunch. After a brief rest, the audience would return to the arena, their excitement palpable as the main event was about to begin. During this time, the spectators would often be entertained by some rookies engaging in mock fights with wooden swords, serving as an appetizer. Once everyone was seated, the arena would be cleared, and for a brief moment, the entire venue would fall silent. The opening ceremony, the pompa, was about to commence. A team of cavalry and 2 musicians would enter, playing the opening fanfare. Then the gladiators would make their entrance, paying homage to the emperor, the organizers, and the audience. The musicians would stay at the sidelines to provide the battle soundtrack, and the referee would step into the arena. The gladiators would then step off to prepare, checking their weapons, donning their armor, and performing their final warm-ups. A tense atmosphere, filled with the fear of impending death, enveloped the arena. With the sound of a trumpet blast, the match would officially begin. Imagine if you were a retiarius about to face your first match in the arena. This afternoon, your opponent is a secutor. How do you survive the fight? Historical accounts reveal that battles between these 2 types of gladiators were among the most popular with Roman audiences. The secutor was heavily armored but relatively clumsy, while the retiarius was nimble but poorly protected and wielded less deadly weapons. Both had clear weaknesses, and the outcome would depend on the psychological and physical confrontation between them. Wearing a helmet with only eye holes, your opponent appeared as an emotionless killing machine, his eyes full of murderous intent, exactly as the helmet was designed to do, creating immense psychological pressure on you. Though inexperienced, you instinctively react with muscle memory. You quickly lower your body to avoid his thrust and jab your trident into the ground in front of his feet. Not only do you avoid disaster, but your strike nearly lands on his ankle, almost injuring him. The scales of victory start to tip in your favor. Seizing the opportunity, you rapidly thrust your trident at his helmet, forcing him to raise his defenses and shift his attention upward. However, your real target is his lower body. In an instant, your trident changes direction and strikes downward. You lunge forward, using your body weight to crash into him. If this combo succeeds, the heavy secutor will be knocked to the ground, unable to rise, resulting in his defeat. Unexpectedly, just as you crashed into your opponent, he used the shield drop technique. When engaged in close combat, he suddenly squatted down and forcefully smashed the metal edge of his shield into your toes. The agony from the blow shot through your body, and you, gritting your teeth in pain, were forced to pull away. The secutor seized the opportunity to regain his balance and opted for a more reliable approach. He placed the bottom edge of his shield on his left shin armor and kept his left leg forward, slowly closing the distance with careful, measured steps. In that moment of life and death, you suddenly remembered that you still had your net. The gladiatorial net was specially designed, with large holes in the center and finer mesh around the edges. The heavier edge allowed the net to open without needing additional weights. As it fell, the net rotated at different speeds depending on the position, tightly ensnaring the target. The enemy behind the shield wall unintentionally widened his target area. When the net flew through the air, he couldn't dodge in time. His sword, shield, and armor got tangled together, rendering him immobile. Amidst the cheers of the audience, you realized that you had won the match. Historically, the survival rate for gladiators in a single battle was only 20%. Ordinary gladiators fought 2 to 3 times a year, so their careers rarely lasted more than 2 years. Rookie gladiators, lacking in combat experience and popularity, were seldom granted mercy and often perished needlessly in the arena. Even seasoned gladiators, though their chances of survival were higher, still had a very slim chance of walking away from the arena alive. The gladiators who survived and left the arena, even with their impressive combat skills, found it difficult to reintegrate into normal society. Once their prize money was spent, they had no choice but to return to the arena, ultimately dying in battle. A rare few, having earned money through their hard work, engaged in small businesses to make a living. Perhaps the young men flocking to the gladiatorial games would never understand why. When everyone is eagerly discussing the match schedules on the inn's walls, the innkeeper's face subtly changes, and he discreetly hides the ugly scars on his arm. At that moment, what he had gained was not glory or status, wealth or fame, but a lifetime of pain and torment that would never heal.